Well, the FBI is now leading this investigation. Joining us, two FBI veterans. Clint Van Zandt was a hostage negotiator and a supervisor in the Silence of the Lambs unit. Clint is an NBC analyst. Jeff Lanza investigated corruption, fraud, organized crime, and terrorism. And Chad Sweet, former chief of staff at the Department of Homeland Security and now the CEO of the Chertoff Group. Gentlemen, good to have you on the program. Thanks very much for joining us. Let me get first your reaction to what we've heard from the police chief. There seems to be a person of interest. We are not saying that this is necessarily a definite second suspect. The police chief stopped short of saying that, but there is another person of interest. Clint Van Zandt, when you listen to what you have heard, what's your reaction?
Well, it seems that this is an absolute possibility. I think we're dealing with the fog of war. I think we're dealing with 400 different witnesses trying to say what they saw, what they heard. I've yet to hear any witness put a gun firing in the hand of anybody else other than the principal suspect, who we know was shot and dead.
Jeff Lanza, does the profile of this individual who is deceased, Aaron Alexis, 34-year-old man from Texas, does this tell you anything about a potential motive?
It seems to me like it's a pure case of workplace violence on its face value. What we have to understand now is the motive. What was going on in that workplace? Is he a new employee to that workplace? Does he have a beef with the government from previous jobs he was involved with as a contractor? Definitely workplace violence. Now we just have to figure out the motive.
Workplace violence. So you would rule out any thought of terrorism, correct?
That's what I'm thinking right now. Now, if there's a second person involved, very few cases, if any, that I'm aware of, where a second person has been involved in an incident of workplace violence. So I would rule out terrorism myself, looking at the facts as we see them today. Without a second person, it looks to me like he's got an issue in the workplace there, and that's what may have caused this to happen. Well,
what about the fact that this is a military facility, that Navy Yard? Chad Sweet, weigh in on this. What is your thought in terms of motive?
I think it's too early and premature to judge that it isn't terrorism. As we saw in the case of the Fort Hood shooter with Nidal Hasan in 2009, you can have a lone wolf who in fact is a terrorist carry out from even within the military's own ranks. But I think one of the most notable aspects of this is the number of casualties is substantially reduced because of the rapid reaction of the very sophisticated local law enforcement. If we had not had such a sophisticated local law enforcement, you might have seen a far higher death count the way you saw in 2008 in Mumbai, where a small band took out 160 people and over 300 wounded.
Yeah, that's an important point to make. Clint Van Zandt, do you agree with that? And do you also agree that this doesn't have the fingerprints of terrorism on it?
Well, I don't see the fingerprints right now. You know, if we have somebody making a religious statement as he fires his gun like we saw at Fort Hood, or some type of political statement, then we can say it's obviously perhaps religious or politically remote terrorism. But until we hear that, and the witnesses I've seen said this guy just raises his rifle and starts firing. So the investigation, any writings, any statement he's made in the past recent months, that's going to give us a key to his head and a key to his motive.
I guess, you know, I'm scratching my head because one would expect that these military facilities are highly securitized. Is there reason to believe that expectation actually should not hold?
No, I think that's still a good expectation, but realize they're not necessarily planning on dealing with this. When was the last time someone went on a military facility with 3 different weapons and shot it up like this? And realize over the years, we've gone from military police officers to civilian contractors. Some of those contractors, though, were excellent. Look, they were the first responders at Fort Hood. They're the ones that engaged Major Hassan. And just like in this case, had it not been for them, more people would have died.
But
well,
Maria,
yes,
the question
yes.
that was just asked is, when was the last time this happened? The answer is 2009, not that long ago. I mean, what we saw with Nidal Hasan was this is happening from within our own military facilities, and it does highlight that we need a much more rigorous surveillance and risk-based approach to clearances. If it turns out this individual was cleared, i.e. had a security clearance, this will make, again, Fort Hood look like a redux.
Yeah, I mean, we should be clear that we don't know any that any of this is true. There are more questions right now than answers. But the idea that he used a former employee's ID to get into the Navy Yard, does that tell you anything? Jeff Lanza.
Well, absolutely. I mean, he probably didn't have access himself, and this really, what it really highlights to me is with most workplace violence cases, if that's what this truly is, they could almost always have been prevented, and it's not somebody flying off the handle. There's things that lead up to it. There's always warning signs, and one of the key factors in preventing workplace violence is recognizing those warning signs, but also if someone's not working in a location anymore, they need to deactivate the ID, and they need to make sure that that person can't get access to a given secure facility.
Do you think he's left D.C. at this point?
Well, number one, we're not even sure there is another he, so I think we've got to be careful. A big question is, how does this guy walk on the base carrying 3 different guns? You know, I think that has to be resolved. Yeah. And number 2, is there in fact a second shooter? We don't know that for sure at all.
Right. Well, I mean, there is a person of interest, is the point here. Is it fair to say he may very well have left the D.C. area very quickly, Clint?
Well, I think he could have, but also we've seen fugitives just hunker down right in place.
Yeah.
It may well turn out, though, this guy had a reason to be there.
Well, just like the Boston bomber hunkered down. Yeah.
I'm
good
sorry?
point, Clint. Just like the Boston bomber, the Tsarnaev brothers, that's Clint's right. Yeah.
That's right. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much.